Welcome to Liesl's Artistic Studio. I have a really exciting watercolor for you to try today. If you're wanting to paint something bold, dramatic, a little bit unexpected, and absolutely eye-catching, then this unique piece is definitely for you. So what are we waiting for? Let's get started. Let's go ahead and get our supplies ready. I have here my watercolor paints, a paper towel, and some water. Then of course we need some watercolor paper. Now I do have a prepared outline drawing on my paper already. Let me pull out a darker version so you can see what I've got going on here. These aren't quite like any flowers you've seen. I've based them kind of on a wild daylily, but they definitely have their own loose look and feel. I'm hoping this is going to get you started with the painting. So I do have this outline available in my Etsy shop at a discounted price for the next week if you'd like to give this a try. Then all you have to do is print out the outline, trace it right onto your watercolor paper using a light table or even just a well-lit window in your house, and you're all set to jump right to the fun of painting. Now next up, we also need some brushes. I'll be using some of my Craftamo brushes today. Maybe let's try pulling out a number 10 round and the medium number 6 round brush. And as a side note, these brushes are available right now, so I will leave a link for them, as well as my Etsy shop link and links for any of the other supplies that you see me using today in the description of this video in case you'd like to look into anything further. I'll just go ahead and tape my paper down with some artist tape. We are going to be having a little bit of background splashes of color in here, so this is going to help a little bit with the warping. And I'm also trying to put this on fairly straight to help give it a little bit of a border too. Okay, good enough. Let's go ahead and pull out some colors onto our tray that we can start off the background with. So let's try pulling out maybe some Dioxazine purple and some mineral violet. And maybe to make more of a red-violet color, let's use some of that mineral violet and mix it with a little bit of Quinacridone rose. We're going to kind of have an analogous color scheme going on here, which are colors right next to each other on the color wheel. So why don't we also take this one step further and take some of the Dioxazine purple and mix it with some ultramarine blue for a little bit of blue violet. I'll pull out a little bit of the pure ultramarine blue as well. And you know what? Let's get a little bit crazy and do something more on the opposite side of the color wheel and make a red-orange by mixing together some cadmium orange with some alizarin crimson. I'll water this down just a little bit. I don't think we need to have it too bright or too dark. We only want a hint of this just to create a little bit of interest into the piece. Okay, let's go ahead and start with our background colors first. And since I've got some of the orange in my brush already, maybe this is a good place to start. So let's go ahead and take a little bit of water and just water down this bottom left-hand corner in sort of the area where we want that color to be. I'm just keeping this pretty loose. We're just playing around with this spot. You can make it kind of fluffy or ruffly like a cloud, just whatever. Now, after I've got a little bit of water in that corner, which also has a little bit of color from the brush as well, I'll take some more of that light red orange and start placing that in the water, letting it blend and spread. In fact, it might even be fun to add in a touch of red violet somewhere in here as well. We'll just play around with it a little bit until we get the look that we like. Okay, moving on, let's do another section of background color. This time let's try it in the upper left-hand corner, maybe spreading over to the right side a little bit as well. I'll start this again with some water first, and then I'll add in the touches of color. For the paint colors in this section, now that I have the water on here, let's drop in some of the red violet first to get us started. This is fairly light in value at the moment though. Now let's take a touch of the mineral violet and begin adding that into the mix, blending it into the red violet color a little bit. Okay, moving on to a darker color. Let's pull out some of the Dioxazine purple and blend that in here and there. Again, we're just playing around with this and doing whatever we feel like looks good. I don't want this to be too dark in value quite yet because we do want the flowers to stand out against the background. So it's okay to keep these more on the lighter side. Good enough. Let's add one more splash of background color, more off to the right side this time, moving down into the corner of the page. Once again, start this off with water first, keeping it roughly and loose looking. After the water is on here, we'll start this section off again with the lighter colors, moving to the darker colors. So let's try a tiny bit of the red violet first, and then move on to the mineral violet next. Now, I don't think I need too much of these colors. We're going to keep this section a little bit more on the blue side of things instead. I'll go ahead now and add in some of the Dioxazine purple and then move on to the blue violet color that we've mixed up with maybe a touch of that pure ultramarine blue to finish it off. Okay, well done. That looks good enough for the background colors. If you want to, you can let this dry naturally, or if you feel impatient like me, then you can speed up the drying process by pulling out a hair dryer to dry it off faster with. All right, I'm just going to pull out a number 6 round brush and freshen up a few of these darker colors really quick, and then we can paint in the main flowers. I want these colors to be pretty concentrated with pigment so that they will stand out and create a nice contrast over those background colors. Let's go ahead and start painting in the flower petals next, section by section, using the wet on wet technique again. So let's go ahead and take a little bit of water in our brush and paint in maybe the top portion of this first flower, going around the center part a little bit. And you might notice that I'm not painting water clear to the very edges quite yet. I'm trying to work kind of quickly here, so I'm just painting on the main portion right now with the water, and then I'll fill in the edges better once as we start putting the paint in here. Now that we have some water in the area, we can go ahead and start putting in some paint colors. Maybe I'll start with some of the ultramarine blue first and spread that around a little. Now this is the time where we can make sure to get into all of the little cracks and the crevices and push that paint closer to the pencil lines. Okay, that's a pretty good start. Let's change up our colors a little and add in some mineral violet next and see how that goes. The good news with all of these colors is that since they are all related and close to each other on the color wheel, it really doesn't matter which colors we pick or choose to put in here. They're all going to blend and mix pretty well together and look good in the end. Now, to be honest with you, I don't exactly have a plan or a rhyme or a reason to how I'm going to be putting these colors in here. I'm just going to use a nice variety, and we're just going to play around with it a little bit and see what we can create. All right, now most of these colors that we've got in here are fairly light at the moment, and so now I think it's time to add in some of the really nice dark colors to this flower to make it pop. We'll put these darker colors maybe around the edges to crisp them up even more and help it stand out more. So this is where I'm going to start using the darker, more concentrated blue violet, as well as that pure Dioxazine purple. Now, something to keep in mind is that because we're letting these colors just blend and spread and do what they want, our paintings are not going to turn out exactly the same, but that's the beauty of it. Each of our paintings are going to be unique in their own way. Okay, I think that's a pretty good start. Not exactly sure how this is going to turn out in the end, but let's keep going and see what happens. Now, we want to let these dry before we start painting in the petals right next to them or touching them. So let's move on to the next flower. I'll paint these in the same way using the wet on wet technique, and maybe I'll kind of do a similar thing using the blue and the lighter purple for sort of a base color, and then we'll add in the darker blue violet and the Dioxazine purple afterwards towards, especially around the edges. I hope you are enjoying this tutorial so far. This painting is kind of different, but it's fun to paint something that's a little bit more unique once in a while. If you find that you are enjoying my painting and teaching style, I hope you'll subscribe if you haven't already so you don't miss out on any of my new and upcoming weekly tutorials. All right, at this point, I'm just going to continue painting in these petals section by section, skipping around on these flowers a little bit to allow for some drying time in between. I may change up which colors I use, and I may not do them all exactly the same. I'm not sure what's going to happen. We're just going to play around and find out. Okay, great job. That is actually a good portion of these flower heads done. I'm going to go ahead and paint in some of the very bottom areas of these flowers next while we let those petals finish drying. So maybe I'll pull out a little bit of ivory black and mix it with some olive green color to create a nice dark green that can help with some shadow spots as well as transition from the petals down into the stem of the flower. So first off, let's go ahead and wet down the area with some water, and then we're just going to jump straight to the darker colors like the blue violet and the dioxazine purple. So let's go ahead and paint in the majority of this section here with these dark colors, and then when we get to the very bottom of it, we're going to throw in some of that dark green mixture and start blending that in towards the stem area. Now we don't need to paint the entire stem just yet. I'm just going to paint down a little ways, and then we'll come back in and finish that off later. With this third flower, even though most of the base is already painted with the blue violet, I'm just going to tie a little bit of this dark green in here as well. Let's also go ahead and use some of that dark green to paint in the stamen areas of the flowers too. All right, I think that the petals are dry enough now that we can go ahead and finish off the rest of the petals on these flowers with the few that are left. Let's paint these in just a slightly lighter value than the others. This way we're going to create a highlighted look on the petals and also create some contrast and the illusion of depth in the flower. But we're going to be painting them in a very similar way with the water first and then adding in the touches of color. And again, you can pick which colors you want to use, just keep them a little bit more watered down and on the lighter side. Okay, I think that's actually it for the flower petals. Let's go ahead and paint in the greenery next. I'll just mix up a few green colors that we can use for this. We've already got the dark green on our tray, which is the ivory black and the olive green. I'm also going to pull out some pure olive green color, and then let's mix up a blue green by taking some of the olive green and mixing it into the ultramarine blue that's already on our tray. I think this will give us a good variety to choose from. Now with these leaves and grasses, they're more on the thin side, so I think that we'll be able to paint these in just using one long stroke of that number 6 round brush. And just like the flowers, we can use any combination of green colors that we want to. Play around with it and just have some fun. To start off with, maybe I'll try something simple and just use the pure olive green. I'll load my brush with color and then just paint in the grass or leaf using just 1 or 2 strokes of the brush maybe. I'll start out with a light touch of the tip of the brush to create a point at the end, and then as I move downward, I'll press down on the bristles to make it thicker in the middle and at the bottom. Now you can leave this just as it is, or if you'd like to create some depth and maybe add some extra color in here, you can take one of the other 2 colors and just dab a little bit of that in there and let it blend and spread. Maybe I'll try the darker green and just place a little bit of that in the middle of the grass blade and let those blend together. The next few grasses are going to be a little bit more thin, so maybe I'll just use some pure olive green for these and just see how that goes. All right, that worked out pretty well. Let's try another one. I'll do this one similar to the first using the pure olive green, but this time maybe I'll add in some extra color of the blue green to blend in instead. Now, Like I say, you can choose whatever colors or combination of colors you want to do for this. The biggest thing is just to try to keep these fairly dark in value. We want this to stand out amongst that background color that we painted at the beginning. I think it's time to change things up a bit, so maybe with this base color for this next grass, I'll try the blue-green first, and then we can add in some touches of the olive green afterwards. When we get to the main stems of the flowers, we're going to want to continue that nice dark olive green and ivory black color down through the rest of the stem, tying in any leaves or grasses that may come out from it. Okay, well done. This turned out really striking, actually. It's kind of a different piece, a little bit more unique, but you know what? That's fun to do sometimes. I've debated whether I wanted to add in one more thing to these flower petals or not. Maybe I'll try it and see how it goes. If you don't like how it looks, then you definitely don't have to do this part. But I might pull out a #1 rigger brush from my little brush set, and maybe I'll just add in some thin vein lines down the centers of some of these petals just to add a tiny bit more detail to them. Well, I'm not sure if I like that or not. I'll let you be the judge on whether you want to do that onto your painting. But my friends, I think that is actually it for this piece. I'm so glad you joined me today. I hope you had some fun and maybe even learned something new. If you did enjoy this tutorial, then I hope you'll consider subscribing to my channel so I can continue to help you discover your artistic side.